The current Speaker of the House, the one and only Philip Gunn, is in the house. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning, Paul. I'm doing well.
It's good to see you again. You might need to get a little bit closer to that microphone. It's over there about a half mile away from you.
There it is. Thank you, Paul. Good morning. I'm glad to see you.
If that was a deer stand, you would have fallen out of it. You know that,
I know that. That's where I need to be this morning, actually.
Well, I think you're taking your time.
I think I'm the worst deer hunter in America.
You know, the worst thing about deer hunting is if you get a deer the first day, you think what's so big a deal about it? You know, the first time you go, and you think that's going to happen every week. Well, it doesn't happen.
Well, I've hunted,
may not happen again in life.
You're right. I've hunted, many times already this year. I'm a bow hunter, as are my sons, and I've yet to shoot one. But doesn't mean I'm not going to stop trying.
Did any of them take a velvet this year?
No, sir, we did not.
No.
Oh, but my son, one of my sons did kill a very nice 8-point a couple of Saturdays ago, yeah.
Did you watch any of the debate last night?
Yes, sir. I watched the whole thing.
I want your and let's put it this way. I'm not going to ask you who won or who lost because I think it's subjective to individual people. If you're backing Brandon Presley, of course he won. If you're backing Tate Reeves, you thought at least he held his ground and things such as it. So I don't know. You can speak to that if you want to, but what aggravated you the most?
Well, I think what we need to remember here is that we are about to select someone who's going to formulate policy. We're not electing a homecoming queen here. This is not who is the prettiest or who do we like the best. This is a serious position that is going to serve for the next 4 years as the governor of this state. I think we, as voters, need to think deeply about what is that going to look like.
Yeah.
And when you look at what life was like in Mississippi under the Democratic control for 136 years, a lot of people may not know this, but from 1876 to 2012, the Democrats were in control of the House of Representatives and most of the time in control of the Senate and the governor's office. What was life then compared to the last 12 years since Republicans have been in control of all three chambers of the government, of the legislature, the House, the Senate, and the executive branch, the governor's office. And the contrast is telling. And so you look at what Republicans have done over the last 12 years, 12 short years compared to 136 years of Democrat control. What's happened in the last 12 years? And the fact it is glaring as to how much life is better in Mississippi for the last 12 years, how much improvement has been made over the last 12 years in a number of areas. And when you look at it in that light, I think you can only conclude that life is better under Republicans than it was under the 136 years of Democrat control. And I would encourage people to think deeply about that and look at who is better positioned to lead this state moving forward. Is it going to be the Democrats? Is it going to be the Republicans? And if they think moving back towards Democrat control is the right thing to do, then they're just uneducated and misguided, because that's not going to be the place where we prosper as a state.
And I say that all the time, and it is frustrating for people because they say, well, we haven't had enough progress. Look what the Republicans have done. And I said, you're not looking at what the Republicans have done. And if it was vice versa on that, I would certainly say it. It's almost like, Mr. Speaker, if you had a giant housing project, and it was done by the Democrats. They built it. They provided the blueprints for our state government. The Constitution, every change that's been made for almost 140 years before the Republicans had a chance. And now we're supposed to get into this dilapidated housing project and fix it up after it's almost in shambles after 140 years, and do this in 11 years. And you go back and you look at the remarkable progress we have made in refurbishing and rebuilding that housing project, and to be commended.
I agree.
But people don't look at it that way. For instance, Brandon Presley last night had to bring out the grocery tax. Who in the hell put the grocery tax in there? That was the Democrats who did that.
That's correct. That's correct. A long time ago. And the idea to cut the grocery tax came from the House of Representatives 2 years ago when we proposed our income tax cut. That was a part, if you recall, Paul, the one plan that we got 107 votes on in the House two sessions ago on the plan that proposed to eliminate the income tax, cut the grocery tax, and cut the car tax in half. Now, I've seen ads on TV where he advocates that, well, that's the plan that the House of Representatives had. And we pushed that down to the Senate. It didn't even make it out of committee down there. But we're the ones who've generated that idea. And that one reason we got the votes is because we had the cutting of the grocery tax in there.
Yeah, but he leaves the impression to the voters in his ads that he can do it by the. You could have a House full of Republicans and a Senate full of Republicans, but I'm Brandon Presley. When I get in there, I'm going to cut them myself. And that's the impression he leaves in his ads.
You're right. And there are a lot of issues like that where governors or any candidate, not just governor candidate, they say, I'm going to do such and such.
Yeah.
They are preying upon the lack of knowledge that the voters may have about how the process works. The legislature controls the ball game in this process. A governor has four powers. He can veto, he can call a special session, and he can pardon. That's three powers that I know of. That's all he can do. So any idea, any legislation that happens comes from the legislature, where it requires a vote on both ends of the building of a majority of the people. I tell people all the time, I don't care how great and wonderful your idea is, if I don't have 62 votes in the House of Representatives to pass it, it ain't going anywhere. Well, I can't pass Mother's Day without 62 votes. Who's against Mother's Day? But I'm telling you, if you don't have 62 votes, it doesn't go anywhere. So the governor cannot do these things by himself.
I am reliving a conversation with James Carville that I heard many, many years ago, where when you were speaking, I heard James Carville say on the same subject, I know that and you know that, but there are a blank number of voters out there who don't know that, and they'll believe me instead of you.
Yeah.
So that's the reason they do this.
They do. They take advantage of the lack of knowledge, I think, that of how government works and the civics that are involved behind that. And this is one reason I think we need to do a better job of educating the people on. The governor has three powers, and that's it, and they're very limited. Special session, veto, and pardon. Anything else, any other legislative thing that happens or policy thing that happens comes from the legislature.
The way I understand it, and again, I know that you shepherd this through and looking for a good solution on this one, and you've got to work with the Mississippi Municipal League on here because people don't understand this. All of a sudden, you cut your grocery tax, and you look at your tax bill as a homeowner, and what's been transferred to you, then you're not real happy with this. But there's another thing that people don't understand. That you've got to find a way, if you're going to eliminate those grocery taxes, how do you supplant that with what the cities need?
Correct. The cities, every state's different, by the way. They tax differently. Some states allow counties to tax. Some states allow cities to tax. In Mississippi, we don't do that. The legislature is the only one with the authority to tax. We do sometimes give a city the right to add a 1 cent sales tax on hotels and restaurants and things like that. But even then, that authority has to come from the legislature. The cities get their money through what we call the diversion. They collect sales tax, or we charge the sales tax. However much sales tax is generated by that city, we give them back 18.5%. So much of their revenue, most of their revenue, in fact, comes from the diversion. And the more sales tax they generate, the more sales they make, the more sales tax is generated, and the more they get back. What we did, if you cut the grocery tax, and in many of our little small towns in Mississippi, the local convenience store or the local grocery store may be the only sales tax revenue that's generated. If you cut that, then you're cutting back to the cities. But in the plan that we proposed, we doubled that diversion to replace that money to the cities. So they were made whole. The cities did not lose any money under the plan we had proposed.
And he kind of co-opted that plan as far as Brandon Presley's concerned?
I don't know what his plan is, but
I've never seen it. We're going to take a quick break here, back more, and we'll talk Medicaid expansion also when we come back. Hey, with the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. Chip in Corinth, I appreciate Philip telling us how to cut the grocery tax and how it's going to work, and that the House is ready to vote for it. Well, I noticed this on the debate last night. It's always the same. When somebody in office tries to explain the boring facts of governance, how this bill does this, what this will do, there's not a lot of emotion in there because you put a lot of facts in. Then someone who is a smooth talker like Brandon comes in, he forget the facts. He puts the feelings in there. It's the boy out there changing tires and working on the barge. And those feelings work with a lot of people because they're kitchen table things. And God knows pickup trucks and kitchen tables are owned only by Democrats out there. But let's go to the Medicaid thing here.
Well, let me.
You want to finish up on?
Well, let me follow up on that point that you made right there, and I think that's an excellent point to be made, Paul. This is why I said what I did in the very beginning. We need to think deeply about these things, and it's not always exciting. It's not always sexy. No. Sometimes your eyes glaze over when you talk about facts and figures and numbers. But you've got to look at the results that Republicans have brought to bear over the last 12 years. And you can take any arena. You can take education, crime, taxes, religious freedom, overturning Roe versus Wade. I can give you infrastructure. We passed in 2018 the largest and best road and bridge plan since 1987. You can take any arena that I'm talking about. The spending. We can talk about spending. What a great financial shape we're in. But you've got to get down into the facts and the figures and the weeds to understand just how great those things are. And you and I don't have time to go through all of that on every show. But we could take one segment and talk about the achievements in education. We could talk one segment and talk about roads and bridges. We could take one segment and talk about workforce development. All of those things are things that we've seen vast improvements in the state of Mississippi over the last 12 years. I wish we had more time to talk about all of those.
I mentioned this yesterday when we start talking about fiscal management and fiscal conservatism. To have the rainy day fund fully funded, to have a surplus like we have, those things matter. And people say, well, you get Democrats, and I remember back during the McCoy years and Steve Holland and still Hob Ryan. If you had any money in the kitty there, we ought to be spending it. We ought to be expanding government. We ought to be dishing it out in subsidies and things such as that. And it was almost to the point where it was a sin to have any money in there. But what they do not understand, and I don't think some of the people do, those are the reasons we gave a teacher pay raise. Teachers got a historic raise. Those are the reasons we're able to cut personal income tax and hopefully continue on that progress. But that fiscal management of conservatism means something.
Absolutely, Paul. Absolutely. And you just made some excellent points about the spending side of things. I have a chart and a graph I'd love to show you sometime that shows what the situation was in 2012 when the Democrats were in control and what the situation is today in regards to spending. We were, I think, about $600 million in the hole. We, in other words, were spending $600 million more dollars than we had to spend. Republicans took over and said, we will live within our means. We will never spend more money than we have to spend. Today, we have filled the rainy day fund. We have fully funded the budget. We have given a $250 million teacher pay raise, the largest teacher pay raise in the history of the state. We have the largest income tax cut in the history of the state. The day we took over in 2012, they only had $200 million in the bank. Give you some perspective. 1% is about $70 million. So it's about 2.5% in the bank. Today it's over $1 billion. 5 times as much in the bank under Republican control than Democrat control. And for the last 2 years, we have not had to issue any debt. For the last 2 years, we have not done a bond bill. We've done all of those things, Paul, even in the midst of the pandemic. when we say we're in the best financial shape in the history of our state, that's not exaggeration. That's not hyperbole. The facts bear it out. And we can give you same facts in education and on workforce development and on all and infrastructure and all the other things that government does. Mm-hmm. I can give you similar facts that bear out how much better life is now.
And then Presley would say, well, then now we need to expand Medicaid because we got all this money.
Well, how are we going to pay for all this? He wanted to, as I recall last night, talk about more for education, more for Medicaid, more on, I forget what, crime or something. It was just spend, and let's look at the budget. 45 cents out of every dollar goes to K-12 education. No politician is going to vote to take money away from education. Another 10 or 11% goes to colleges. So 55 cents out of every dollar is being given to educational pursuits. It's the largest expenditure in the budget. The next highest expenditure in our budget is Medicaid. Right now it's at 20%. So every tax dollar that we receive, your listeners are giving us their tax dollars. Out of every dollar that the state gets, they're already spending 75% on those two expenditures alone. When you add in corrections, so we're running the rest of the budget, the rest of the government on 25%. So if you're going to increase that spending on Medicaid, which is already the second largest expenditure in the budget, if you're going to increase spending there, where are you going to get the money? The only place to get it, because you're not going to take it from education, the only other place to get it is from the other functions of government, or you raise taxes. Those are the only two ways that we could increase spending on Medicaid. So
that's been the suggestion in the past by just about every Democrat.
Yes, sir. That's where we're headed. I mean, that's where we're headed is that you're going to have to raise taxes, or you're going to have to turn out criminals, or reduce spending on roads and bridges, or reduce spending somewhere else in order to generate $300 million to add working people onto Medicaid rolls.
When you look as someone who's leaving the politics, at least for a while, we hope to see you back one way or the other again, but what do you think the mindset is? You begin to feel like there is a lot of people out there calling their legislators and saying, we got to do something as far as school choice is concerned. We have to do something. We're spending, as you said, 55 cents every dollar for education. And we still have people on the other side saying, you people didn't fully fund MAEP, which is one of the most flawed formulas I've ever seen. By the way, why in the hell don't we count the overflow money from the lottery? That's just one of the things that we don't count in the kitty. I don't understand that.
Absolutely. And we tried to change that formula, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago. We in the House brought forward a bill to do that. The formula is flawed, and it needs to go away. And we had, at that time, a phenomenal way to fund it. You and I had that conversation. I was on your show, and we talked about it. It was easy to understand. Competition is necessary, I believe. And in my first year, it's either my first or second year as Speaker, we brought forward a charter school bill to try to bring in a competition in places where where the kids don't have a good quality option for education. I think school choice needs to be considered. I think we need to find alternative ways to provide good education. If the kids are in an area where they're not having good education opportunity, we need to provide that, and school choice is one way to make that happen.
Let's talk about the car tag fees. As one of the other things he does is as governor, forget about the Republicans in the House and Senate, forget about the municipalities, forget about everybody else. He, Brandon Presley, will be able to, with a stroke of the pen, cut car tags in half or whatever he wants to.
The governor cannot do that by
So
himself.
You're telling me this is a lie, but he can do it if he does. Well, first of all, have you been polled by Brandon? Because he said most of the people in the House and Senate are with him, even Republicans, on these bills.
Well, again, we brought forward the proposal to cut the car tag 2 years ago. That was part of the income tax elimination plan that we brought forward, was to eliminate income tax, cut groceries in half, and cut the car tag in half. So we passed it in the House. We sent it down to the Senate. It didn't come out of committee, as I recall. But but there again, the governor cannot do that with the stroke of the pen. It takes the legislature. They must pass the bill. Then the House must pass it. Then it goes to the Senate. The Senate must pass it. Then it goes to the governor's desk. Again, the governor's only got 3 powers in this state, and cutting taxes is not something he can do unilaterally.
Did you, in any of the other things that they were talking about last night? Again, I didn't have a chance to watch that one, but let me go back to Medicaid expansion again. The proposal that the governor put out, have you had a chance to review that?
I've just seen. I have not studied it in depth. I have seen the bullet points on it, and it is a way. Let me make this point too.
Hold that until we come back. Final segment.
Very good.
With the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn. Right now, let's get back to the Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn, and let you complete your thoughts on what you were saying before we left.
Well, there's this allegation or insinuation out there that if Medicaid is expanded, it will, quote, save the hospitals. I think it's already been established that that is not going to generate enough money to save some of these hospitals, particularly in the rural areas. The reason they're struggling is their population base has diminished, and they no longer have the population base to support the provision of all the services that a hospital would provide. And I think the manner in which medical services are being provided is going to have to be looked at, and a new model is going to have to be created in some of these areas where the population base is just not there and they can no longer support a full-blown hospital. But the allegation that Medicaid expansion is somehow going to save them is a false one. And I think the hospitals will even tell you that. I think the hospitals will say the amount of money that Medicaid expansion would generate is not going to meet all the needs that we have in order to survive.
It's a little bit like the Veteran Stadium in Jackson, overbuilt now. I mean, I always think about the movie theaters in these small towns of Shaw and Shelby and Drew. Just about everybody had a movie theater. The population's gone. They can't support a movie theater. And now to go in and spend tax monies to refurbish that is a waste.
Right.
Is a waste.
That's exactly right, Paul. And it's just basic economics. It's not just in the medical arena. As you rightly point out, movie theaters, grocery stores, other businesses that at one day in time existed are no longer there because the population base has declined.
Well, your overall view of anything else on that last night as far as the debate?
Well, I go back to what we talked about in the very beginning, and I guess this is a good way to conclude it, is just to look at the achievements that have been made. We talked earlier about the spending achievements. Look at the education achievements. We were 50th every year, annually 50th every year. And now some rank our education system as high as 23rd. Before we passed the third grade reading gate, only 69% of third graders could read on grade level. Today it's over 90%. Graduation rate has gone up 11%. One thing that was stated last night that was incorrect was that our starting teacher pay is not up to the national average. It actually exceeds national average. The teacher pay raise that we gave now puts our starting teachers' pay beyond not only the southeastern average but the national average. Our fourth grade reading and math scores have been the improvements over the last 2 years have been number one in the country. The list of achievements in the arena of education just goes on and on, just like we talked about in spending. Religious freedom. We have passed more bills to protect religious freedom in this state than the Democrats ever did when they were in control. We have made improvements in infrastructure, like we talked about. We passed that massive road bill in 2018 in the special session, which puts $120 million a year into our roads and bridges, in addition to the lottery money. We passed the lottery back in the 2018 session. But you got that $80 million from the lottery going in there every year. So it's almost $200 million a year, every year, that is going into the road and bridge program.
And student population has been dropping.
Student population has been going down. And you made something before I came on, I heard you talk about the dollar per pupil, Oregon, that's right, per pupil expenditures. Back in 2015, Paul, when we had that egregious Initiative 42 that was supposed to, quote, fully fund the schools, just as a matter of curiosity, I pulled the per pupil expenditure for the top 10 school districts in the state, and I think it was around $8,300 per student. I pulled the per pupil expenditure for the bottom 10 performing school districts in the state, the worst 10 school districts in this state, and the per pupil expenditure was over $10,000. So my point there is improvements in education are not necessarily a function of.
Well, no, your point
money.
is the more you spend, the worse it gets.
Well, in that situation, the more we were spending, we were getting less results. And in addition to that, as you rightly point out, our student population has diminished in this state. It's dropping. So we're spending more per student and getting, we were getting less results. But I will say under the Republicans, we have seen monumental increases in improvements in education.
Look, I thank you for choosing us over a deer stand this morning.
Yes,
I appreciate it so very much. I look forward to talking to you in the future.
I look forward to being back. Thank you, Paul.
You got it, man. Appreciate it very much. Speaker of the House, Philip Gunn.